Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and following the 3H's of the channel. And in this video, it's 6 really insane encounters. There's no other way to describe it. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a sub with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. When I was 16 years old, I used to walk a mile to school pretty much every day. Most of the walk was down this old backcountry road that was populated mostly by my family and a bunch of other rednecks. So it's 6:50 in the morning. This is the normal time that I start walking. I decided to go a little early to get breakfast, so I leave at 6:30. And I'm walking down my little backwoods road with no lights, just walking by moonlight. I'm almost down my road when I hear something off in the woods. I turn and I see a large shadow standing there. I'm too tired to comprehend anything. My first thought was, oh, it's just a bear. And then I stare at the shadow for a few seconds. My mind finally puts two and two together. There are no bears around here. And then I suddenly hear the thing do this weird growl or grunt. It's so low that it seems to reverberate in my chest. And that's when I realize this whole time that the shadow has been crouched over this entire time and is beginning to stand up. I take a couple steps backwards. I turn and run to my house as fast as I can. I make up a story about how I forgot my books and I needed my father to drive me in. Not exactly the scariest of stories, but it freaked the hell out of me. And then a few days later, we got a few calls from neighbors about their pets and other animals being killed. But I guess that's the life out here in the boonies. A few years ago, I was camping out in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas. I was sitting on a ridge. There was forest on one side and a somewhat steep bluff that drops off on the other. I was doing a final check of my pole and tackle for some night fishing in a nearby lake. I notice a bright blue light on the horizon. I look back down and keep fumbling with my tackle. After a couple of minutes, I look back up and I notice that it's gotten brighter. I say, odd. I stand up, facing the horizon and the bluff edge, noticing that it's actively getting ridiculously bright. Something in my head finally clicked, and I realized it might be getting brighter because it's getting closer. An unexplainable sense of urgency and dread fills me, causing me to dig my pistol out of my pack along with my phone. I steady my hand and try to take a photo. The blue light suddenly zips to the left and back again. It darts overhead, and my head began to feel like it was being squeezed. This object goes into the tree line and then back overhead numerous times over the span of a few minutes, and it's insanely fast. I scramble for the cover of the trees, and by this point, my head feels like it's going to implode. And then suddenly, I wake up the next morning at the bottom of the bluff, being checked out by a game warden and a medical rescue with no memory of how I got down there. They say, "Sir, we found your camp up there. Have you been drinking or doing any drugs? We think you tripped and fell." I get evaluated at a hospital. I had a fractured rib, ankle, and a bruised back, but the most noteworthy injury was this chemical rash looking thing on my back and shoulder that seemed to resemble a sunburn. It cleared up in a few days. I've never told a soul, and I've never seen anything like that again. What the hell happened to me? So this didn't happen to me. A friend of mine told it to me. So my friend, Aaron, lives in a super old house. It's probably haunted, but more than likely, Aaron has stuff following him because him and I were stupid as kids. We did a lot of Ouija board and ritual stuff that we truly regret But anyway, Aaron's friend Mike fell asleep before Aaron did. Aaron had finished working on comic pages. At the time, the two of them were working on some kind of project together, so Aaron goes to the bathroom. Mike wakes up and is facing a wall. Mike starts talking to Aaron. Aaron responds, but Aaron is in the bathroom. Mike is still talking to this whoever is posing as Aaron, and then the real Aaron comes back. Mike asks him if he was in the room the whole time. Of course, Aaron says no and leaves the room again to lock up the house. And then Mike could hear him talking again, still facing the wall, and he is now too scared to roll over. He says, "I know that you're not Aaron." Mike is scared shitless at this point, knowing someone else who sounds like Aaron is in the room. And then it replies, "I know that you know I'm not Aaron." Mike hears scratching noises, moving closer to the bed. Mike is too scared to roll over. He feels scratching on his blanket and a weird breathing. The real Aaron finishes locking up the house and enters the room again. Mike is crying by this point. Aaron gave Mike a medicine pouch to sleep with. I never usually tell these stories, but I figured I'd tell this one. Whether or not you believe me or think I'm telling the truth or not is irrelevant to me. I'm simply sharing an experience. When I was 15, I went camping with my uncle, his 3 kids, my brother, and a cousin. So we park our vehicles and we hike 2 miles out into the woods. It feels like forever. There's so much walking. We finally get to a spot. We set up our camp. We get drinks, food, and a fire going, and we gather wood. So far, we're having a good time. And as the night progresses, it begins to get dark. My brother is the first to go to bed, and then my cousin, and then the 3 kids. I'm still up with my uncle, and then he comes over to me. He says, "If anything comes near this campsite, you have my full permission to shoot them as many times as you think it'll take." And then he hands me a 1911 pistol, and then he goes and passes out too. It's just me up now. I look around. I look at the pistol. I stare at the fire for a good 5 minutes, and I think, well, this is a whole bunch of nope. I put the pistol down next to his pack. I go in the tent and try to sleep. But then 2 minutes later, or something like that, I hear screeching off in the distance. It's getting closer, and it's non-stop. It feels like that they're not even taking a breath. I've never even heard anything like this before. And I hear thumping suddenly with the screaming, and I think, oh my God, something's coming this way. I stay still as I can, listening. The pack is right next to the tent entrance, so I make ready to try and grab the pistol. I hear it literally run past the fire and our campsite, still going outside, but the screeching and the thumps don't stop until it runs all the way past, and then it starts to fade. I just lay there all night, wondering what the hell can be on 2 legs and scream that long, and just run by the fire in our campsite so quickly. For the rest of the night, I just stayed in the tent, holding the gun, trying to sleep next to my uncle. I have never been so creeped out or scared in my life. I have no idea what I heard, but it didn't sound like an animal or anything. Needless to say, I haven't really been camping since then. Back in 2008, my dad bought into a hunting farm way up north. It was a super nice place. It was probably 400 acres altogether, and then it opened up into a national forest. It was extremely easy to get lost in if you strayed even just a little bit from the main trail. There were lots of springs there as well, with the best water that you've ever tasted. Anyway, I, being a young lad of 15 at the time, had ventured off to find one of these springs. My friends and I had an interest in setting up a still to make moonshine. We were 15, booze was hard to come by at the time, and how we were supposed to do this was beyond me, but we knew we needed cold water, so I was out looking for a steady water source. I spent a lot of time going deep into the property, looking for a good out-of-the-way one that a hunter would be less likely to stumble upon. After a whole lot of searching, I eventually found one. It was clear and good tasting. The water was very steady and was up next to a cliff-like face. It was difficult to see from above or from below. I spent the next couple of hours cleaning some leaves away, making a nice little fireplace, etc. As I'm there, I watched the sunlight dip down below the trees, and this is no problem. I took the ATV out. I could make my way back. I spent a few more minutes just listening to the woods, the birds, and the wind. Looking back, it was probably the most at peace I'd ever been in the woods for quite some time. And as I was sitting there just enjoying myself, the first thing that made a flag of "what the hell?" run up in my head was that it was all of a sudden like someone just turned off the volume. It got real quiet. Actually, quiet probably isn't the right word for it. More like silent. The breeze went away. Not one bird chirping. No leaves. Zip. Zero. And suddenly, my nostrils are assaulted by this terrible odor. Imagine if a skunk and a turkey vulture fornicating on top of a carcass. Slowly, the odor changes from overpowering to just death. Seriously, there's no other way to describe it. It just smelled like death. Kind of like wet moss and a mausoleum. Again, all of this is to the soundtrack of nothing. Only the wood popping in my fire is making any noise. I actually think the lack of sound is what gave me the heebie-jeebies at first. And then I noticed two lights out in the distance, up high, way above the trees. It was a strange type of light, like the kind of light you'd see on a fogged-over glass. It's not really projecting anywhere or lighting anything up. It's just kind of burning, so you can see it, and nothing more. My mind is running through the possibilities of what it could be. I'm already full of nope between the smell of death and the silence. And then I notice the lights are closer, and they're next to each other. I notice that they're only 20 or so feet above the trees. I'm already with my back flat against the cliff face at this point. I've already decided that whatever this thing is, I don't want anything to do with it. It had to be close to 70 feet tall, with the head of a buck, those eyes with that dull light. The stench was overpowering at this point. As it moved, it didn't knock over any trees. It didn't really interact with any of its surroundings. It just kind of meshed through them. I could see that the deer's head was mangy, and it looked like stuff was leaking out of it. All I can say about the body is that it was big, as I had bigger problems when it stopped. It paused, only for a moment, parallel to my campfire. If it looked down at all, it would have seen me. But it paused. It sniffed the air, and then took a large bound, one of the largest I've ever seen, darted away and headed north. After making sure that I was indeed alive, I lit the fire in the ATV and tore off back for camp. I don't think I slept right for 2 months after that. So I saw a tall, pale-skinned being in my grandparents' yard in Willow Creek, California, back in 1994. I had grandparents, Dad's father and stepmother, who lived in Willow Creek until their respective passing in the early 2000s. Before then, my dad, sister, and I would visit at least once or twice in the summer, and sometimes for Thanksgiving or maybe Christmas. We lived in San Jose, California at the time, which is an 8-hour drive away. We loved going to hike in the surrounding forests and playing in the Trinity River. We grew up hearing about Bigfoot. The famous Patterson video was shot in the area, and the town is Bigfoot tourist heavy, but we were taught to watch out for the very real pumas and bears. I need to explain a bit about how my grandparents' house was laid out for some aspects of this story. They had a small 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house set at the corner of 2 streets. The road into the neighborhood off the main road ran along the backyard, and the house ran along the other road off of that road. Several houses ran on each side of the street, and a house sat behind their yard. There was a chain-link fencing that was 6 feet tall that went around the backyard and most neighbors' yards, instead of solid wood fencing that you'd see in other places, so you can see into most yards. From the street and their house, it then slopes down into the backyard and neighbor's yard, roughly 10 feet in total. Their backyard was mostly just grass and weeds, with a small semi-growing garden near the neighbor's fence line, and there was this big tree, maybe an oak of some kind, next to and partially over the solarium. They had a raised deck running the length of the back of the house, with stairs that went down into the yard at one end and a solarium off the kitchen at the other end. Inside the house, the kitchen and the dining room are immediately next to each other, with the living room and the front door next to it. At the back of the living room is a short hall with a master bedroom behind the kitchen and along the wall with the deck on one side, and the bathroom and a guest room are along the wall facing the side the street is on. My grandparents, of course, got their master bedroom. My dad would take the guest room, and my sister and I would sleep in the living room in the winter, or, in the summer, the solarium. The story takes place in mid-August 1994, one last summer trip before school started in a couple of weeks, at the request of my sister for her 9th birthday earlier that month. I was 11 at the time. We left early to get there before dinner, so Dad could nap from the drive a bit, while me and my sister went down to the portion of the Trinity River that ran at the very back of the neighborhood. The afternoon and the evening went as usual. That night, though, we went to sleep in the solarium, as was the custom for our summer trips. At some point in the night, I woke up. No real reason, not even to go to the bathroom. I just have always done this from time to time. Even still, I do this. I did what I usually do, and I stared up at the stars and the moon, around half visible. I couldn't tell you if it was waxing or waning. And all of a sudden, I got an intense feeling of dread that skipped fight or flight and went straight to freeze or you're dead. After some time, most likely just a minute or two, I turned my head to the side to look into the yard. I had to turn to my side and lift myself a bit to get a better look, but the source of my feeling was impossible to miss. Standing at the bottom of the yard, next to the neighbor's fence line, stood a tall, skinny creature with skin the color of the moon. It had no hair on its head or anywhere else that I could see. Its eyes were shiny white with a reflective quality, but not bright like a bright light was shining on them right then, just moonlight. Its face had human features, but it seemed squished and flatter. Its arms seemed really long, but that could be just because it was really tall. The chain-link fence came up to its armpits, so it had to be around 7 to 8 feet tall. Not enough to just step over the fencing, but I didn't hear it climb over unless it had been in the yard before I woke up, and just didn't get the dread feeling until later. Its body had dirty brown, dark gray-looking rags over its chest and around its hips, covering its crotch. And it was looking right at me. I got scared and ducked down into my sleeping bag as far as I could. My sister has always been a heavy sleeper, and I didn't want to wake her up for this anyway. The next thing I hear are heavy footsteps on the deck coming toward the solarium. There's a wood door with a screened window on the top of it, not opened at the time as far as I can remember. All was quiet for a little while, so I peeked out through a small fold of the sleeping bag, through one of the bottom windows of the solarium next to the door. I saw its pale, large feet. The skin was rough, and the toes were gnarled with dirty nails. I curled up, trying not to make a sound or move much. The bag was getting stuffy. The next thing I know, my dad is gently moving me with his foot, asking if I was cold because I was still huddled down into the bag. I looked around, kind of disoriented. There was no evidence of that creature from the night before. No marks or footprints, not even any bent fencing. My dad was a huge skeptic of anything paranormal, cryptid-like, or otherworldly, but I told him anyway. He, of course, blew it off as a dream. Sis, being a deep sleeper, didn't notice anything. I asked my grandparents if they heard or felt the thumping on the deck, which would have been along their bedroom wall, but no, they both seemed weirded out by my story, and my grandma later privately told me there's lots of strange things that happen up here. That's why we avoid being outside at night. But she would never elaborate, though. So, did any of those encounters stick out to you? If one did, let me know which one that it was down in the comments. If you have one of your own, as always, I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. Also down there is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way, and super thanks here on YouTube. And also, if you've signed up on Patreon recently, I can't message you for some reason. I usually message everybody to say thanks for signing up to the Patreon and all that stuff, but there's some issue with Patreon and I can't message people right now, so just letting everybody know that. I also can't reply to messages either, which is weird, so I hope that that gets sorted out soon. But with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then make sure to like and subscribe, and tick the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.